It is so good to be back recording a chess video. So I've been super busy lately just with life, right? So much going on. Haven't been able to post as much as I would have liked, so sorry about that one. But I'm back tonight with an absolute classic between Magnus Carlsen and the Swedish #1 Nils Grandelius. Now this is way back in March 2020 or somewhere around that region, the dark days of COVID lockdown anyway, and Nils here, he's playing Magnus in the Banter Blitz Cup. It's online chess, 3 minutes to each side, so high drama and a remarkable queen sacrifice played in this game. So Magnus kicks off with knight to f3. We see c5 from Nils. He now prepares to fianchetto. We see the copycat variation here. Is that even a thing? I just made it up. c3 played, and after bishop g7, we get d4 striking at the center. Now that's ignored with knight to f6. We see bishop g2, castles, and here Magnus says, all right, you want to give me the pawn twice? I'm going to take the pawn. So he lops it off. a5 is now played to clamp on b4, stop Magnus supporting that pawn, because if you did that and after captures, pawn captures, well, you're going to open this diagonal in a horrible way. And so instead Magnus castles the king. We see knight a6 preparing to recoup the pawn, and now Magnus clings on with bishop to e3, and he talks about this knight g4 move. How is he going to react to that? Well, bishop d4, e5, this is what he's talking through, what he's got planned, because when it comes, this is the move that he's got prepared. So he counterattacks. We see takes here, captures on g4, and after this capture of pawns here, knight captures on c5, we can see the material is level again, but Magnus has got the advantage because he's got a slight lead in development and also a better pawn structure. That d pawn is a weakness and a problem, and actually the top computer move is to start with queen d6 here, squash it, and therefore squash this bishop. But Magnus goes g5, still a good move, kind of clamps on these squares, and also anticipates this pawn moving and then the pawn being attacked. Now we see queen d2, preparing rook to d1. And here Nils, he goes for this plan of expanding on the queen side. Very logical to try and sort of undermine all of this, but possibly better in Magnus's thoughts was something like knight e6, or even the computer considers bishop to c3, which looks really weird. But the idea is that these knights get really powerful as they start hopping now. So we see rook b8 played though. Rook f to d1 from Magnus, and after b5, there was no good way to actually defend this pawn, so it's abandoned. This is where Magnus now gets his knights going, and it's so instructive, right? Because how many of us would lop off that pawn? But the problem is, after the queen captures, rook takes back, you're actually really opening the board for the black bishop pair, and there's a very concrete tactical refutation here, because after the knight moves, well, you're chopping down here, and black's doing absolutely fine, even slightly better in this position. So, coming back here, Magnus does not take pawn on d6. Excuse me. He instead hops with knight to d4, so he's looking at the c6 square, preparing to fork rook and queen. Bishop d7 covers that one, and now the second knight hops with a vengeance into the camp, looking at all of these squares, and so rook e8 is now played, prophylaxis against some of these knight jumps. Now we see queen f4, further activation from Magnus, great chess, but Nils, to be fair to him, really counters with quality moves now. So top move here is rook to e5, which he plays, and the threat here is to actually take this pawn on g5 with the queen, something like that. So Magnus, he goes knight to f6 check, best move. Now the bishop captures, which you have to do. You don't necessarily want to give up that dark squared bishop, but if you sidestep with the king, then the knight can take here, queen recaptures, and knight c6 is the problem, supported by this bishop, and now you're forking these two rooks, and no time for any counterattack stuff, or you take here, counterattack the queen. No good, winning for white. So coming back here, you have to chop. Pawn recaptures was played, and now another great move by Nils. There are different options here. He could go knight e6, rook b6 is mentioned by the engine, but g5 is up there with the best moves, and it's a really interesting idea just to kick away the powerful queen, does gain some space, of course, and one day black would love to recoup that pawn. But what does Magnus do here? Well, this is where he's like, look, I've just seen such a fun line, I've got to go for this one, and bang, he gives up his queen, and the compensation is really unclear. The computer slightly prefers this for black. So after pawn captures, this is the follow-up move of knight c6, forking these two and using the fact that the bishop is pinned to the queen. Now there's some brilliant variations going on here. We're going to dive into a couple, but just before I show you that one, quick shout out to the sponsors of this video, AIMCHESS. Now I've been absolutely loving AIMCHESS lately. It's a really interesting and different kind of tool for learning chess. So if you're looking to improve, then check out the next 30 seconds. It's very much for you. Is this you toiling away trying to improve your chess? If so, you need AIMCHESS in your life. They'll take your recent game data from Lichess, chess.com, bring in personalized lessons and skyrocket your rating. Use the link down below, try it for free, and code EPIC at checkout will get you discount if you do want a premium plan. So we've just seen the knight hop into c6, forking these two pieces. Now if you go queen e8 to stay with the rook, well, this is how the variation could proceed, and this is the top line for the engine. Now you get rook ac1, attacking the defender of this, and if the queen defends the knight, which is the top move, then this is what Magnus was planning, and he taught this all through his calculation. Now when he got to here, he was thinking that if black goes h5 to give the king some room, well, this is bad because of check, bishop e4, and you're actually getting mated in this variation. But coming back here, you don't have to go pawn h5, queen b6 is best to cover the square and also attack this pawn. Now the computer gives a slight advantage here because after bishop d5, only real try to attack this pawn, this is a sample line, everything gets liquidated, and for some reason it prefers black in this endgame, but equal pawns should be okay really, you know, for white to hold a draw there. But coming back here, we didn't see queen e8, staying with the rook. Instead, Nils takes this dangerous pawn. Yes, he allows his rook to drop, but then he activates the bishop and he's going for this piece activity, and he's saying, okay, we've got equal knights and bishops, and my queen is going to be better than your two rooks. I've now activated, I'm going to try and attack your king. But Magnus, he seizes an initiative now. So he goes rook ac1, hits the knight. It hops to the edge of the board, hitting this pawn, and now Magnus does not save the pawn. Again, a classic, interesting Magnus move. He brings this knight back into the game, and he's tempting Nils to chop that one off and activate his rook, because then these rooks are just exploding into the position. For example, if you take the pawn, well, now you can check king g7, and there are two good moves. One is the obvious bishop to d5, converging on this pawn. The other is bishop e4, and just to show you this, it's really beautiful. Say you hop the knight back in with knight c4, looking to come around. Well, then there's rook c6, and the queen is actually checkmated. It has 0 squares to escape to from the attack of all these rooks and bishop here. So coming back, we didn't see the bishop capturing that knight on d7. Instead, queen e7 was played, coming away from the attack, and now b3 kicked the knight. It jumped into b2, hitting this rook. Magnus goes rook d2, and this is where Nils starts to get really tricky by activating his queen. By the way, winning the piece is no good, because then rook c7 comes, and because the bishop is pinned to the queen, this rook's invading. Again, there's just huge problems converging on all of these light squared weaknesses. So the knight wasn't captured, the queen jumped to a3, x-raying that undefended rook on c1. Magnus goes knight c5, targeting this bishop, and now Nils should have saved that one with bishop to f5. Instead, he goes for this tricky move of knight c4. His time is getting low, opens the queen attack on the undefended rook, but Magnus finds this check. King g7, the knight takes the bishop with check. Pawn recaptures, and now he goes for the simple rook to c2, escaping from the attack of the queen, asking black what they want to do with the knight, and Nils missed the best move here in the time pressure. So he had to find queen e7, hitting the undefended rook and also covering the 7th rank. Now the game goes on, rook a8 is best, and white has a small advantage. but what was played in the game here was knight b6. But now the rook invades. The king has to come up the board, and bishop e4 shuts the trap on these light squares once again. g4 was played just to give the king some room, but Magnus says no. Rook g8 cuts the king, and now you cannot avoid this checkmate coming here. The only way to do it is with crazy moves like rook c1 check. Give up the queen, but it just staves off the mate for a few moves. So a truly beautiful queen sack for compensation game by Magnus Carlsen. If you want to see another incredible game played by him, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.